Join me as I read Picking Up the Pieces to 100 Broken Promises by Yushima Burks. Remember to subscribe to the channel, share it with your friends, hit that notification bell. We're reading Chapter 1 today. Let's get into it. Reckless behavior. The saying, whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger, cannot be applied in some situations. Like abuse, for instance. Going through a childhood laced with abuse, divorce, and at times neglect did not make me stronger. It made me insecure, unsure, and afraid. I grew up thinking that everyone that loved me would abuse me and everyone that I loved would leave me. I was pretty messed up. Issues from my past distorted my palate for understanding what is acceptable and unacceptable. When these issues were brought up in the pursuit of healing, it was an anomaly how my mom said that she didn't remember the horror she had put me through. She said she did the best that she could, and if you know better, you do better. I would have been able to accept this had she not known better. She knew better. She showed my brother love and concern. She attended his football games and encouraged him to make friends. With me, on the other hand, she wasn't that great of a mother. She tried to beat the creativity out of me and called me every name in the book except a child of God. I grew up thinking I was nothing, worthy of nothing, and destined to be nothing. Even with the love and encouragement my father gave me, it was difficult being surrounded by hate and negativity on a daily basis. When my father moved from Wisconsin to Alabama, the abuse got worse, and there was no one to cover me from the wrath of my mother. So when I eventually went through my own divorce, I was hyper-vigilant in trying to make the transition as painless as possible for my own son, Mikey. He was only 2 years old. I had to hold it together, continue to nurture, love, and support him, and figure out our new normal. I had to be the better parent because I did not want to put my child through what I had went through. Without a doubt, I was going to do everything I could to make sure that my child was not going to feel the way my mother made me feel as an adult. Working in my field, social work, I've heard it all. You are fine. The past doesn't matter, said one abusive mother to the only child of hers that continues to talk to her. I've witnessed the alcoholic dad who does not remember the beatings his wife and children suffered for years. There are a million scenarios that fall under abuse. I'm not sure my mother forsook me, but I know now that she was hurt, and hurt people hurt people. I can only imagine the things that my own kids tell their therapists. No matter how much we want to protect and love our children, we will inflict some trauma without knowing them, or without knowing it. I just hope they will love me anyway, and that I will be forgiven for the mistakes I make with them. Some parents who feel that they are different now feel like the children who were abused should forgive and forget. In order for the victim or survivor to receive healing, the abuser must be forgiven. The forgotten part is where the lines are blurred. Forgiving does not mean putting myself in a position to be continually abused in any fashion. I believe that it's necessary for adult survivors of abuse to receive help. Whatever help they feel will work, professional or not. It helps to talk about it, pray about it, and make a conscious decision to be happy, healthy, and whole. While time does not heal any wounds, God has a promise that is timeless. His promise, I will give you back your health and heal your wounds. Jeremiah 30:17. My promise to myself, I promise not to allow my past trauma to continue to dominate the narrative in my mind. What's your promise to yourself regarding issues that you've had in your childhood? I'd like to hear about it. Making new memories. I wish I could remember more about my childhood. It's all so black and white. I remember my mother wanting me to look nice. I always had to look put together. I would have the nicest clothes to cover my bruises. My hair was long enough to shield black eyes or bruised cheeks. I wish I could have enjoyed the outfit she took so much time to put together for me. I wish I could have enjoyed her more. I wish she could have enjoyed me. There's so much pain and shame in these memories. Even now, I wonder what she would think of me for writing my truth, exposing hers. Although I am writing about it, I have forgiven my mother and I love her very much. There's so many black holes of missing memories, but I remember our family outings and pizza Fridays. We went to Chuck E. Cheese at least once a month. I remember riding my bike outside and sharing roller skates with my friend across the street. I remember my dad doing my hair and my pigtails always being uneven, but I was so proud of them because he took his time to do them. I remember my mother taking me to get my hair done professionally. That was her contribution to making me pretty. I want to remember the good so badly, to find something that I can hold on to about my mother during that time. I do remember her laugh. It was hearty. She laughed unabashedly, with her mouth open, and she would throw her head back. She was beautiful to me. She reminded me of Claire Huxtable from The Cosby Show. She wore her hair feathered, and it moved whenever she did. I loved her. I still love her. I just wish I could remember more. I had this conversation with her a while ago, once I had begun the process of forgiving her, where I asked her to tell me some good things about my childhood that she could remember. She said it couldn't have been all that bad, but she couldn't remember anything good herself. That was alarming for me. I always wanted to please my mother. As I got older and I reached out to her, I made it a point to create memories that I could share with my children that wouldn't give them nightmares. I invited her to places like the zoo and the museum with me. I invited her to my house and my home, and I visited her often. When she needed her space, I gave it to her. And when I needed mine, I took it. I've always wanted to have a healthy mother-daughter relationship with my mother. The love from my father and the values he instilled in me has always allowed me to keep trying with my mother. Whenever I called my dad to get advice or vent, he would never speak badly about her. He would quote the same scripture every time, and it has been with his influence that I am able to forgive and still love my mother. I am so grateful for the foundation built on the Word of God. Without it, I would not have anything to hold on to. His promise: when my father and my mother forsake me, then the Lord will take me up. Psalms 27:10. My promise to myself: I promise to accept what I can and cannot change. What's a promise that God has made to you that you hold on to concerning your memories? And what can you promise yourself to help you to get over some of those bad memories? Dead inside. When I think about restoration, I think about all of the nights that I prayed for death and all of the mornings I cursed life. I knew God. I knew of God. I didn't have my own relationship with him yet. I wanted to be zealous like my father about how good he was, and I didn't doubt it, but I didn't understand it either. The concept of unconditional love wasn't lost on me because I still love my mother. I was a scared, lonely teenager, and I knew God loved me because my dad loved me with all my flaws, just as I was, but it wasn't enough. There was nothing sweet about my 16th birthday. I was severely depressed and desperate for attention. My dad was in Alabama, and I lived with my mother. I had sex with my boyfriend just to feel something other than pain. But the results of that ended up being more pain than I could ever imagine. I ended up pregnant. I couldn't hide it from my mom. I didn't know it at the time, but my severe morning sickness that lasted all day was much more than morning sickness. It was a life-threatening illness that occurs during pregnancy called hyperindus Okay, let's try this again. It was, I had hyperemesis gravidarum. Okay. I would have suffered through this with every pregnancy. I was 4.5 months when my mother took me to get an abortion. I had already felt the baby kick, and the ultrasound showed that he was a boy. There was nothing I could do to get over the pain of killing my baby. Shortly after the abortion, my mother called my father to come and get me. And as always, he was there within 24 hours. He told her that he wished she had called him sooner, before she made the choice to abort the baby, and he would have picked me up then. I can't remember the drive back to Alabama or how long it was before I attempted suicide. I remember a deep gut-wrenching pain in my heart that nothing could feel. My father prayed with me and for me every day. He called off work so often so that I wouldn't be home alone. He sat in the bed with me and sung to me. He rocked me in his arms as if I were a toddler again. None of that lessened my pain. None of that lessened my pain, or maybe it did, but my pain was so deep that I didn't recognize any improvement. The day I took the pills, I wanted to die peacefully in my sleep. I took 23 extra strength Tylenol. Who knew that it wasn't enough to cause an imminent death? I did find out that I was allergic to codeine and ended up calling my father 6 hours later and telling him what I had done. Instead of dying, I felt really sick, and I vomited most of the pills out anyway. My father rushed me to the hospital, where I was greeted by an annoyed doctor and sarcastic nurses who taunted me for my foolish actions. I remember being forced to take charcoal and being threatened with a stomach pump. The doctor was very graphic about how painful it would be and how sore my throat would be after the procedure. My father was in the hallway for what seemed like hours, pleading with my mother to talk to me. I shook my head profusely as he walked towards me with his arm outstretched to hand me the phone. I refused to grab it, but he placed it up to my ear anyway. She quietly began to speak. "You dumb bitch. You can't even kill yourself right. The next time you want to die, slit your wrists and sit in the tub. Or take more pills and lay your ass down. You don't call somebody to rescue you. You can't even die." Right. I looked up at my dad, indicating that our conversation was over, and he smiled, hoping that this was the incident that would bring my mother to her senses and help us to move on. It would be 16 more years before I told him what she said to me that day. I wish I could say that this would be the last time I experienced any of these things, but it wasn't. I ended up pregnant with my daughter a year later. My father did pick me up, and she was born beautiful and healthy. My struggle with depression did not end there, nor did my attempts at suicide. I just thank God that He had other plans for me, and that my end did not come when I wanted it to. Having an abortion is a decision that millions of women and families make, and while some think it's taking the easy way out, it's a decision that has lasting effects. I believe a lot of my choices after the abortion were to punish myself. It took years, but I've finally forgiven myself. I no longer blame my mother for doing what she thought was best for me. I forgave my ex-boyfriend for not being capable of being there. Hell, I couldn't be there for myself. And what did I expect from a 16-year-old boy? God's promise to me and you is, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans for welfare and not for evil, to give you a future and a hope." Jeremiah 29:11. My promise to myself: I promise to stand in my truth, no matter how painful it may be. Have you ever experienced suicidal ideations, suicide, or abortion? What got you through it? Or are you still struggling? I'd love to hear about it. As a teenager, I struggled with depression. It was this sadness that caused me to put myself in situations that could have cost me my life. I can't remember why I felt utterly despondent that day. It was different from the other days. I know that the night before my mother was in a mood, so that meant that I got it. I remember waking up sick to my stomach that I had to face another day. One of the many times I skipped school, I accepted a ride from a stranger. Once I accepted the ride, he very calmly told me that we were driving up to the hotel down the street. I didn't object. I didn't run or jump out of the car. I wasn't even scared. It's like part of me welcomed death. The other part of me just wanted my mother to find my bloodied, half-dead body in a hotel room, just so I could hear her whisper, "I'm sorry," or "I love you." I was hurt, and the only thing I attracted was more pain. Once we arrived at the hotel room, I waited for him to hurt. I watched him intently as he tried to engage me in a conversation about school and the weather, as if we were old friends. His hair was greasy and curly. He wore a pressed, white button-down shirt, tight blue jeans with a large round belt buckle, and cowboy boots. All I could think was that I rarely saw black men wear cowboy boots. He asked me my age, and I told him 16. He told me he was 32 at the time. That seems so old to me, and I remember thinking how gross he was for wanting to have sex with a teenager. I felt dirty when he began complimenting me. It wasn't until he began undressing me that I felt uncomfortable. It was late for common sense to kick in. I had avoided it all of this time. Now, he stood between me and the door, and I sat quietly on the bed. I wasn't a virgin, but I had never done anything like this. I'd only had a couple of boyfriends in my life, and this was way out of character for me. I wanted to leave, and when I stood up, he forcefully held my arm and directed me back to the bed. I insisted that he put on a condom. He commented on how that was a good decision. He went on to say that I should always suggest that any boy I sleep with puts on a condom. I felt like I was getting life lessons from a man that was about to rape me. The story of my life. When it was over, he made a telephone call from his huge flip phone. He was late picking up his wife from work. He sounded so apologetic on the call. He knew what to say to calm her. He promised her that he would be there shortly. He had been held up, and he ended the call with, "I love you." He put his clothes on and walked out of the door. Looking back, he told me I could have the room for one more hour if I wanted it, but I had to be out by 12. He only paid for 3 hours. Once he drove off, I walked back to school and stayed for the rest of the day, as if nothing happened. Instead of telling someone what happened to me, I thought about how good I was at hiding my pain. I was almost proud of it. No, I was proud of it. I had become a master of disguise. Who was I fooling? No one. I was a 16-year-old mess. I really felt like I had gotten away with something that day. My behavior was a textbook cry for help. If one person had asked me if I was okay, I would have had a full come apart. I was dying for attention, any kind of attention. I was still reeling from the abortion I had, and I didn't know how to forgive myself at this point. I was also angry. I was angry at everyone for not noticing my pain, and I was angry at myself for being in pain. Looking back, I wish I had spoken to a school counselor or to one of my friends' moms. Things may have been different. Being 16 was hard. And I didn't have the internet with millions of doctored images and opinions to sift through on a daily basis. Parents, talk to your teenagers. Be a listening ear. Give them good advice and allow them to express themselves. You just may save their life. God's promise. Heal me, O Lord, and I shall be healed. Save me, and I shall be saved. For you are my praise. Jeremiah 17:14. My promise to myself. I promise to ask help when I need it. I know that I could. I know that I do not have to suffer alone. Listen, if you're feeling suicidal, if you're making bad choices, if you find yourself in a position where you're doing things to harm yourself directly or indirectly, please tell somebody. And if that person does not help you, tell somebody else and keep telling until you find the help that you need. You can call 211 from your cell phone. Tell them what you're going through. They'll be able to direct you to someone in your area that can help you, maybe even for free. Don't give up. I didn't. And I'm happy today. Twinkie, Twinkie, little star. One friendship that I will always miss is my dear friend Twinkie. Twinkie was cute as a button. She smiled all the time and was friendly with everyone. All of the girls wanted to be like her and all of the guys wanted her. We were thick as thieves for years. I had a crush on her brother, but I ended up meeting her and we became fast friends. Twinkie lived 3 hours down in the corner house. Twinkie lived 3 houses down in the corner house. I was 14 and she was 17. She was the one that I called when my mother got out of control and I needed to talk. Twinkie's mom was very strict, so she couldn't come by when her mother was home because I had an older brother. Twinkie wasn't thinking about Curtis, but we couldn't convince her mother of that. Twinkie trained every day to be an American gladiator. Y'all remember that? Y'all might be too young, but people my age, 40 and over, American Gladiator was everything. Okay, let me get back to the book. They were coming to Milwaukee, and Twinkie was going to try out. She would have made it too, but she got pregnant by her high school sweetheart. Being a teen mom did not stop her from graduating top of her class while holding down 2 jobs. She handled her business, and I admired her for that. She knew everything about me. She was one of the few friends who actually witnessed my mother's angst against me. While I stood at least 5 inches taller than her, she became my protector. Twinkie knew that if she came over, my mother would not be as abusive as she normally was. When things got out of hand at home, her house was the one I went to for respite. When I ran away, I went to her house, but that was short-lived since my mom called threatening her mother with harboring a runaway. At 17, when I got pregnant with my daughter, I moved to Alabama. When my daughter was born, naturally I named her after Twinkie. Twinkie was the reason for my dad's $500 telephone bill. My dad was kind enough to drive me to Milwaukee to be there for the birth of Twinkie's first baby boy. When I moved back to Milwaukee, we picked up where we left off. By that time, she had married her high school sweetheart and had another boy. Unfortunately, her husband was a great provider and a wonderful father, but a horrible husband. He cheated and lied, and eventually Twinkie left him. I was there for her during this time like she had been there for me. Twinkie and I remained friends well into our late 20s. We lived together at different points in our lives. We shared moments that no one but God witnessed. I would still call her a friend today, but now it's awkward. I think things changed when she became involved with her cousin's longtime boyfriend. Her cousin had 3 kids with Chubby, and she loved him, but Twinkie snagged him up, and they moved in together. I guess when you put someone on a pedestal, especially if they didn't ask to be put there, the fall is hard. I love Twinkie, but I could not support what she had done to her cousin. I began to worry about our relationship. I wondered if she would ever betray me. I couldn't imagine that, but I still worried about it. Chubby and Twinkie stayed together for about 5 years on and off. I visited them, but not often. Eventually, I got married and moved on with my life. We spoke here and there, but things weren't the same. I know that we can have a history, and I hope that one day Twinkie and I will come back together and be as close as we once were. I know what it's like to hurt and make decisions based on emotions. I'm not holding any grudges against Twinkie. In fact, if I still lived in Milwaukee, I think we would still be very close. I also know that she's human, and I need to remember not to judge people based on the idea of them that I have in my head, but on their own merit. I'm not saying that I shouldn't have a standard or that I shouldn't set boundaries. What I am saying is that I am learning to accept people for who they are, the good, the bad, and looking back, Twinkie's good outweighed her bad. God's promise to us: be kind to one another, tender-hearted, forgiving one another, as God in Christ forgave you. Ephesians 4:32. I promise, my promise to myself, I promise to be open and available for a loved one that's in pain. Okay, you guys, so have you ever been in a friendship where they did something shady and you were like, I don't know about this one? Or have you been the friend that did something shady and your friends was like, girl or guy, I'm not feeling that? Or do you not care what your friends do? It's their business. I don't know. Let me know. Leave it in the comments. Send me an email. Whatever. Should be in the description. This is it for chapter 1. I finished it up. Next, I'll be reading chapter 2. So make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell. In chapter 2, it's going to be some deep stuff, you guys. That's why I'm not in a big to-do about reading it. However, I am going to get to this as quickly as possible because I don't want to leave huge gaps in between reading these chapters. This is from Picking Up the Pieces to 100 Broken Promises. We finished up chapter 1, part 1, and we'll be moving into chapter 2. All right, until next time, be safe. Tell someone if you're in pain. Be happy, healthy, and whole. You guys, this was a pretty tough read. Thank you for watching. Please support the channel by liking and sharing and subscribing.